solution and strengthen our resiliency to climate change. A number of those organizations which answered are religious organizations, and I ask unanimous consent to submit letters from 6 of these groups to the congressional record.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs wrote to us that, quote, the need to transform the world's energy economy while addressing global climate change is not only a religious and moral imperative, it is a strategy for security and survival. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops says that, and I quote, at its core, global climate change is not about economic theory or political platforms, nor about partisan advantage or interest group pressures. It is about the future of God's creation and one human family. The bishops asked Congress to consider 7 principles in shaping responsible climate change policies. 1, addressing global climate change means protecting the common good. 2, climate change will hit the most vulnerable communities the hardest. 3, we must seek solutions that enhance rather than diminish the economic standing of the poor. 4, new resources must be made available to poor communities to adapt to the effects of a changing climate. 5, we must protect vulnerable peoples from the negative human health effects of climate change. 6, local affected communities should have a voice in shaping the response to climate change. And 7, technological solutions to reduce carbon emissions and adapt to a changing climate must be made available to the people of developing nations. That is from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. We heard from the Quaker Friends Committee on National Legislation. They wrote that climate change, quote, is the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced, end quote. The Evangelical Environment Network urges immediate bipartisan action, saying, and I quote, the simple truth is those opposed to climate action have done a good job of having climate change viewed as a political issue, even a partisan one. We firmly believe that the need to act to overcome climate change is a moral issue, that it should be viewed morally rather than in a partisan fashion. The National Council of the Churches of Christ, representing 37 Christian denominations, calls for a national policy that, and I quote, lifts up justice, stewardship, sustainability, and sufficiency as guiding tenets. Interfaith Power and Light, a national faith-based campaign against global warming, tells us that its 40 state affiliates and thousands of congregations view a swift and equitable transition to a clean energy economy as our moral responsibility and are prepared to support the task force's efforts every step of the way. These religious leaders and groups are, unlike Congress, not sleepwalking through history. Faith groups throughout America are acting on their sense of spirit, justice, and stewardship, and are mobilizing locally to combat and prepare for the effects of climate change. In my home state, Rhode Island Interfaith Power and Light provides free energy audits, training workshops, and online information about implementing and maintaining energy efficiency programs for houses of worship. The Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island's Community Relations Council is working to reduce the carbon footprint of Rhode Island synagogues by 14% by next year. In East Providence, Rhode Island, the Newman Congregational Church made some simple changes like installing occupancy sensors and better lighting, and experienced a 25% reduction in electricity costs. Last year, the Beneficent Congregational Church of the United Church of Christ in Providence undertook an ecumenical Lenten carbon fast. This spring, from Easter to Pentecost, the congregation will be taking part in the United Church of Christ's national campaign of volunteering and environmental advocacy. Madam President, these urgent calls from religious leaders of so many faiths and these conscientious actions by individual houses of worship demonstrate the powerful connection men and women of faith feel to the wonders of creation and to our fellow humankind. For some, this connection derives from a connection to a higher power. For others, it is hope for future generations or a commitment to justice for all living things. I once heard a colleague here in Congress brush off the warnings of science about climate change, saying, "God's still up there," implying that there's no need to worry about climate change. Well, if God is still up there, what better use of the gifts of moral reasoning that we have been given as his people than to protect his creation and one another from harm? Madam President, as we sing in the old hymn, "Field and forest, vale and mountain, flowering meadow, flashing sea, chanting bird and flowing fountain, call us to rejoice in thee." We are each called in our own way to wake up and to do the right thing. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Florida.
Madam President, I just want to comment on the senator from Rhode Island's comments. First of all, I know it's so heartfelt and so genuine, and I want to thank him for that. And I want to thank him from approaching it from a faith-based standpoint about this fragile ecosystem that we live on called planet Earth. And he's brought a perspective with that chart that he had of the Earth, that it is so beautiful and yet it looks so fragile. As a matter of fact, when you look at the rim of the Earth from the perspective in space, you see a thin film and you realize that that's what sustains all of life, which is the atmosphere. And even with the naked eye from space, you can see how we're messing it up. I could see coming across Brazil, I could see the color differentiation where they were destroying the Amazon, and then could look to the east at the mouth of the Amazon and see the effects of the extra silt that discolored the waters of the Atlantic for hundreds of miles. And so the senator brings a great perspective, and I thank him for it. And, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Respond by thanking the senator from Florida for his
Senator from Rhode Island.
For his kind remarks. He is the only member of this body, now or ever, to have seen that view of our planet from the space capsule that he looked down on Earth from. He has spoken with enormous eloquence and passion about what that experience meant to him, both on the floor and to us in our caucus, and I'm very grateful for his kind remarks. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, I want to say that, first of all, we've had three astronaut senators. We had Senator Bill Nelson, who just spoke so eloquently about the planet and the way he saw it. Our own very beloved and hero with the right stuff, Senator John Glenn, and also Senator Jake Garn, our wonderful colleague who retired many years ago, but was also on the VA HUD committee. And when I first came to the Senate, it was Senator Garn who really was really one of the members of the other side of the aisle that really helped me learn the Senate and really gave me a tremendous introduction to the space program. In fact, we went in a bipartisan way to every space facility in this country, so we could learn what were the great assets we had, how we needed to fund them, and what was the future of the American space program. So we've had 3 senators who were certified astronauts and actually went into space. We've had other senators that have been in orbit. Some maybe still are out there somewhere. But I say to my 2 colleagues with my feet firmly on the ground, we want to really thank them for what they're doing really to save the planet. Because of the advocacy talked about by the senator from Rhode Island and the senator from Florida, we really, in the Commerce Justice Science Bill, which I fund, which funds not only the American Space Program, but also funds the National Science Foundation, we need to understand our great planet. And another great astronaut, Sally Ride, a very happy and blessed memory, who passed away last year, was asked by NASA to do a strategic plan. And what should NASA be looking at? Should we be going to Mars? Dare we go even further? Venus. What about, should we do it with human beings? Should we do it with robots? But Dr. Wright came back with many suggestions, but one of which was, she said that we should study the planet Earth as if it were a planet in our solar system. She said there was a great belief that there was even intelligent life on planet Earth, and we'll continue to search for it from time to time here. Now, but really, Dr. Ride encouraged us to really look at our own planet, and our own planet as if those from outside of our solar system were looking at us, because she said that what every astronaut feels, and I've talked to many, along with Senators Nelson, Glenn, and Garm, is that when they go up and see the majestic universe that God has created, their greatest thrill is to look back on the planet Earth and how touching and how moving it is and how we want to protect it. And we need to protect it because there is life on this planet. There's the life of human beings, and there's the life of the bounty that God has given us in both the sea and on the land, and agriculture or in others that help take care of us, and we're now called to take care of them. And I pledge to them, if we can work together on a bipartisan basis, it's really not about global warming. It's about saving the planet. We need to look at all of our science across all of the subcommittees and say, what are the best practices that nourishes us and nourishes our planet and nourishes the way that we would like to continue to proceed in the 21st century. I believe science and technology leads the way. It is a great gift given to us, the gift of reason and the gift of discovery. So let's all work together, and I want to thank you for what you said.
Thank you, Chairman.
Madam President, we are now moving towards a few minutes before we're going to recess for the luncheon hour. I want to just comment briefly that today is to say that for those of us, the Roman Catholic faith, this is indeed a great day. We now have a Pope who has been formally invested as the leader of our church, Pope Francis. And we know that there were many members of the Senate that would have liked to have gone to that investiture, but duty called, and we're here bringing to close our debate on the continued funding resolution to make sure we're funded through fiscal 13
in an orderly, agreed-upon way and move to our big budget debate. But Pope Francis is calling us today, as he has in other sermons, to think about the poor, the elderly, the children, and the vulnerable in our society, as well as the very planet. So we say to His Holiness, we really wish him well. We really wish him well and the ministry that we believe he will provide to the world. But we should also take heed to this message about the children, about the elderly, and about those that are really vulnerable populations. And again, we think that what we have in here, our step, is really an appropriations that will guarantee funding through fiscal 13. I don't want to link it to His Holiness's message. We wish him well, but I also wish now we could do what we could in these closing hours. We've been guaranteed 30 hours of debate. We've used probably about 5, that we look at how we can bring this debate to close in an agreed-upon way on both sides of the aisle so that we can then move on to the budget debate for fiscal 14. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not note that the senator from Kansas was here. Before, I will not recess until the gentleman has a chance to speak.
Madam President.
The senator from Kansas.
Madam President, thank you, and thank you to the gentlewoman from Maryland and my chairman. I spoke last night on an amendment that I have continued to ask to be made in order on this continuing resolution. As I indicated last night, we're going to spend in excess of $1 trillion in this bill, and I'm hoping that my amendments and perhaps others can be made in order yet during this post-cloture 30-hour period of time. One of the concerns that's been raised is whether or not, if my amendment was adopted, whether this would create difficulties in the House of Representatives for the final passage of the continuing resolution. And I'm pleased to be on the floor, particularly with the chairwoman being here, the gentlewoman from Maryland, to indicate that I now have indications from the Speaker's office that they would have no objection to the amendment that I'm continue to offer, that I hope will be made in order, that I hope a vote will be taken on, related to the air traffic control towers. Also, in the period of time since I last spoke, we have numerous members of the Senate who have now joined as co-sponsors of this amendment. The number is now 14 Democrats and 12 Republicans. The number continues to grow. And I've had a number of conversations with particularly Democrat members of the United States Senate who indicate to me, why can't your amendment be made in order? And so I'm hoping, as members of the Democrat caucus and the Republican conference meet during this 12:30 lunch period, that perhaps there's still an opportunity for this issue to be resolved. And I would indicate once again that while I listened to the suggestion of the Majority Leader this morning that we move to the budget during this 30-hour post-cloture time frame, that in the absence of some agreement related to this amendment, I will object to moving to the budget until the 30-hour expire. I also have indicated publicly that I will object to the next 30-hour, the next opportunity in which the unanimous consent is requested as we get back to the base bill. It's not my nature to be an obstructionist. This is an amendment that matters greatly. It has been determined by the parliamentarian to be germane. And in my view ought to be made in order, just as the chairwoman talked about bipartisan efforts. This is one that clearly is bipartisan and apparently bicameral. And so I'm hoping to utilize the rights as a member of the United States Senate to see that there still is an opportunity for this amendment to be considered. And I would say that the reason this matters so much in this time frame is that I'm of the view, and I think it's shared by many, that in the absence of this amendment being adopted, included in this continuing resolution, and the continuing resolution being passed, that the control towers will be eliminated on April the 7th, and there will be little, if no, opportunity for the Appropriations Committee then to restore funding to, in a sense, a program that no longer exists. Many of the topics that I share with my colleagues here about the consequences of sequestration, and am willing to work with them to see that we move money from one place to another to solve that problem. In the absence of that happening, there's still an opportunity for the Appropriations Committee and ultimately the Congress in the appropriations process to solve those problems. But should the April 7th come, the 179-plus contract towers are eliminated, then it seems highly unlikely to me that any appropriation process would include money for a program that's no longer in existence. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Maryland.
Madam President, I appreciate the senator from Kansas's tenacity and persistence and being an advocate for his constituents. I would hope that during this noon hour, I can give no promises. There's leadership considerations on both sides of the aisle. But we have to acknowledge the senator from Kansas is a real fighter for what he believes in, and I think we admire that. How that gets translated, I think this will be subject to further discussions during this noon hour. I therefore ask unanimous consent that we recess the Senate until 2:15 for the respective party conferences to discuss important issues.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m.
And as you heard, the Senate's in recess now to allow members to attend their weekly party meetings. When they return, they will continue work on the CR, bill to keep the federal government operating through September. Senators yesterday agreed to cut off debate on the Senate Democrats' version of the bill. The next measure up for consideration is the tax and spending blueprint for fiscal year 2014. Senator Reid's goal is to complete action on the so-called budget resolution before senators start a 2-week spring recess. Now, in terms of a timeline for the Senate's budget activities, The Hill writes today, Senate Democrats say they will force a final vote on their 2014 budget before leaving for the Easter recess at the end of the week. And given the time constraints related to work on a 6-month continuing resolution to fund the government, it's possible this could mean a rare vote on Saturday or Sunday on the Senate floor. Quote, there will be no more talk of not having a budget, Majority Leader Reid said today. We're going to have one before we leave here for recess. Live coverage of the Senate when members return at 2:15 Eastern today here on C-SPAN 2. And coming up on C-SPAN 3 this afternoon, the head of immigration